What if I told you that Stephen Hawking, in his final scientific work, described the exact same place that Edgar Cayce visited in a trance state 80 years earlier? Science calls it the holographic universe. Cayce called it the Akashic Records. Today we're going to find the exact point where modern physics and the afterlife collide, the point that changes everything you think you know about death, about the soul, and about what happens to you after your heart stops beating. Buckle up, because this one's going to hit hard. Let's start with something most people don't know. Hawking had one final scientific paper. It was called A Smooth Exit from Eternal Inflation. He finished it 2 weeks before his death in March 2018. 2 weeks. A dying man paralyzed in a wheelchair, unable to move anything except a single cheek muscle. And he's still working. Until the very end. Why? What was so important that he couldn't let it go? Hawking was chasing the answer to a question that haunted him his entire life. Not just how the universe is structured, but how many universes there are. And his last paper said this: our universe is not the only one. It's one of countless bubbles in an infinite ocean of space-time. Each bubble is a separate universe with its own laws of physics, its own constants, its own history. The multiverse. And right here, pay attention. This is where it gets under your skin. Cayce described what he called planetary spheres, places where the soul exists between incarnations. He was clear. These are not physical planets you can find with a telescope. They are states of consciousness, other levels of reality, other vibrational frequencies of existence that are right here, right next to us, but in a different dimension, inaccessible to our physical senses. Stop. Do you understand what just happened? Hawking mathematically proves the existence of parallel universes with different physical laws. Cayce, in a trance, describes parallel levels of reality with different laws of existence. They're talking about the same thing. One uses tensor calculus, the other uses the intuition of a sleeping man, and the other side, the afterlife that people have searched for in the heavens and underground, it's not a place. It's a neighboring universe in Hawking's multiverse. It's a different frequency of space-time that exists right here, right now, in the same room where you're sitting and watching this video. We just can't see it. The same way we can't see the radio waves passing through our bodies right this second. But that doesn't mean they're not there. Now, the most explosive part. What I call the main bridge between science and mysticism. Hawking's information paradox versus Cayce's Akashic Records. Remember these two ideas. They're the key to everything. The information paradox. For decades, Hawking argued with colleagues about black holes, specifically about what happens to information when it falls into one. Picture a star that explodes and collapses into a point of infinite density. A black hole swallows everything: light, matter, energy. Nothing can escape from beyond the event horizon. The question was this: is the information about an object that falls into a black hole destroyed forever? Most physicists said yes. Hawking initially agreed. Then he changed his position completely. After years of calculations, he reached a conclusion that stunned the physics world. Information is never destroyed. It gets encoded on the event horizon of the black hole, like data written on a giant two-dimensional screen. The object disappears, but the information about it, every quantum detail of its structure, remains forever, imprinted on the fabric of the universe. Now, Cayce, the Akashic Records. In trance, Cayce described what he called the Book of Life, a cosmic database where every thought, every word, every action of every being that ever lived is recorded, every moment, every decision, everything without exception. He said these records are accessible in altered states of consciousness, and that's exactly where he retrieved information during his sessions. Think about this. Hawking mathematically proves information about a physical object cannot be destroyed. It gets recorded on the boundary of reality. Cayce describes information about every living being is recorded in the Akashic Records, the eternal database of the universe. If the information about a piece of rock falling into a black hole doesn't vanish, then tell me, why should the information about you disappear, about your personality, about your consciousness. If the laws of physics forbid the destruction of information about a dead star, why would those same laws make an exception for your soul? Materialist science has no answer to that question, because there is no answer. Because by every law of physics, the information about you cannot disappear after your body dies. Let's keep going. The law of conservation of energy. This is drilled into every child in physics class, and yet most people somehow forget it the moment death comes up. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It only changes form. This is not a hypothesis. It is a fundamental law of nature that has never been violated, and not once, in the entire history of science. Not a single exception. Hawking built on this law. All of modern physics stands on this law. And now, you. You are made of energy. Your neurons fire electrical impulses. Your body radiates heat. Your cells are biochemical reactions, meaning constant energy exchange. You are energy, literally, at the level of physics. So when your heart stops, by the law of conservation of energy, that energy doesn't vanish. It changes form, it changes carrier, it changes state. Cayce called this reincarnation. He said the soul is an electrical charge, a vibration that isn't tied to any specific body. The body is a temporary tool, the vibration is eternal. Science calls this a transition into a quantum state. Different words, same meaning. The energy of your consciousness doesn't switch off like a light. It transitions. Where to? This is where it gets truly mind-blowing. 11 dimensions. M-theory, supersymmetric string theory, proposes that reality exists in 11 dimensions. We perceive only 4, 3 spatial dimensions and time. The other 7 are curled into structures so tiny that no instrument we've ever built can detect them. Yet. But they're there. Mathematically, they have to be. Without them, the equations don't work. Now picture it. 7 additional dimensions of reality. Right here. Right now. Around you. Inside you. In this same room. Invisible to our senses, which are wired for a 4-dimensional world. What exists in those dimensions? Science is silent, because it doesn't know, because there are no instruments that can go there. But Cayce knew, or at least claimed to. Cayce's planetary spheres, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter and the others, are not physical planets. They are states of consciousness corresponding to specific vibrations, specific dimensions of reality. He said that between incarnations, the soul moves through these spheres, absorbing certain qualities and lessons. The Mars sphere, willpower and struggle. Venus, love and harmony. Jupiter, wisdom and expansiveness. This isn't astrology in the trivial sense. This is a description of levels of reality, of dimensions, through which consciousness moves after it's freed from a physical body. And when you overlay this description onto the mathematical structure of 11-dimensional M-theory space, the match is unsettling. Now, Hawking's fear. This is the most uncomfortable part, but also the most important. Hawking was a proud atheist. He said openly that God doesn't exist, that life after death is a fairy tale for people who are afraid of the dark. He said that when the brain dies, consciousness shuts off like a computer losing power, loudly, publicly, defiantly. But something changed in his final years. His colleagues noticed that Hawking grew increasingly careful about making statements on the nature of consciousness. He pulled back from absolute certainty. And that final paper, A Smooth Exit from Eternal Inflation, it wasn't just about physics. It was about how the universe ends, how one can exit it, smoothly, without catastrophe. Why would a man with 2 weeks left to live be thinking about a smooth exit from the universe? Cayce said the greatest mistake a person can make is believing they are separate from the source, from the creator, believing you're a closed system existing on your own rather than part of something infinitely greater. And here's what I keep thinking. Hawking, a man who spent his whole life describing the universe as a mechanism without a maker, in his final months, working on a theory of smooth exit from space-time, did he accidentally stumble onto what Cayce called God? Did he mathematically brush up against what mystics describe as the unity of all things? We'll never know exactly what Hawking was thinking in those final 2 weeks. But the question stays open, and it burns. Now, the simulation. Why are we here? The simulation theory is at its peak in scientific circles right now. Physicists at Oxford have built mathematical models describing the universe as a computational process. Hawking didn't reject this idea outright. He acknowledged that if our brain operates as a quantum computer, then questions about the nature of reality become far more complex than they appear. If our world is code, if it's a hologram or a simulation, then death is simply an exit from the program. Not the end, just a transition, moving from one level to the next. And Cayce said this: Earth is a school. The soul doesn't arrive here by accident. It comes with a specific purpose, with lessons to complete, with karmic debts to resolve, with experiences that can only be gained inside a physical body, because the physical world offers something that no other sphere can provide. Combine this with simulation theory, and the picture becomes extraordinary. You are not a random collection of atoms that appeared from nowhere and will disappear into nothing. You are a player, with your own program, your own objectives, and death is not game over. It's the end of a level, a move to the next one, with all data saved, all experience preserved, all information about who you were and what you did intact. Because as Hawking proved, information doesn't disappear. Viktor Vanek, a Belarusian physicist and academician who Soviet science tried to silence. He introduced the concept of the chronal field, a special physical field that carries the temporal characteristics of any object. By his theory, every object and every person generates a chronal field containing information about their entire history, past and future. This field does not break down when the object physically dies. It persists. The chronal field of a human being is what mystics call the soul, an informational matrix of personality existing in a special physical field of reality. Vanek arrived at this conclusion through physics alone, and by the end of his life had become a deeply religious man, because the mathematics led him somewhere he never expected. Now, put it all together. Hawking proves information is never destroyed. It's preserved on the boundaries of reality. Cayce describes, the Akashic Records store information about every soul forever. Hawking proposes, parallel universes exist with different physical laws. Cayce describes, between incarnations, the soul exists in other spheres of reality with different laws of existence. Hawking proves, our world may be a hologram or simulation. Cayce says, Earth is a school, a program for the development of souls. The law of conservation of energy says, the energy of your consciousness cannot vanish after your body dies. It only changes form. And this is no longer mysticism. This is physics. The afterlife is not clouds. It's not a tunnel with a light at the end. It's not a religious metaphor. It is a neighboring universe in Hawking's multiverse. It is one of those 7 curled-up dimensions that are mathematically required by string theory. It is a different frequency of the chronal field that Vanek wrote about. It is the space where the Akashic Records exist, the ones Cayce read in trance. It's not somewhere far away, it's here, right here, in this same room, in this same space, just on a different frequency, on a different level of reality that is closed to our biological senses, but not closed to consciousness that has been freed from its physical body. This is what happens when physics stops being afraid of the right questions. This is what happens when science and mysticism stop fighting and start talking. 2 people from different eras and entirely different worlds found the same truth, from opposite directions, with different tools. And that truth is this: you will not die. The information about you cannot be destroyed. The energy of your consciousness cannot disappear. You are not a body with a soul, you are a soul with a body, a temporary vehicle in this specific program, on this specific level of reality. And when the program ends, the player keeps going, just without this particular character. One final question. If even Hawking, a committed atheist, a pure rationalist, was in his last days thinking about a smooth exit from the universe, if even he mathematically confirmed what Cayce was describing 80 years earlier in a trance, Then who among us has the right to absolute certainty? What right do you have to be completely sure you know what death is, if the greatest physicist on the planet, at the end of his life, admitted the question was far more complicated than he thought? Write in the comments, do you believe in Hawking's mathematics or in Cayce's experience? Or do you think, like I do, that they were describing the same thing all along? If you made it to this moment, you're not the same person who pressed play. Because now you know, the line between science and the afterlife is far thinner than anyone told you, and it gets thinner every year. Subscribe, because in the next video we go even further, into territory that official science still refuses to look at.